Hello and welcome to my craft room. I've got a new little slow stitching project for you today. I think it's beginner friendly, but I'm hoping it will also appeal to the more experienced stitchers out there, and I think some of you guys could take hold of this idea and do amazing things with it, which I would love to see. It's also a great way to use up all those tiny little scraps that we kind of can't bear to let go of. We're all the same. You know what I mean. This is actually the second part. This video is kind of the second part of this project. If you're a complete beginner, I would suggest go and watch the first video first. I will link it in this description box, because in that one I go over the supplies more thoroughly, talk about how to use the threads and things, answer a couple of questions that people have asked, and demonstrate the few basic stitches that we're going to need for this project much more carefully than I'm going to today. It's all time stamped. It'll come up with chapters at the bottom of your little window, your little video window, and it'll all be time stamped in the description box. So you can just, if you just want to check out, oh, how do you do chain stitch again, you can just jump straight to that. So hopefully that will be helpful for beginners, but I thought the more experienced stitchers out there don't need to watch all of that. It's a much longer video. So if you're a beginner, go and check out the first video first and then pop back. If not, we'll just jump straight in and go from here. It's a pretty straightforward, I think an experienced stitcher could easily do one of these, or even a couple in an evening. Or you could get more elaborate and take longer over it. It just depends. Let me stop waffling and show you what I mean. So I wanted to come up with a way of using tiny little scraps like these that I can't bear to throw away. So this is some of the stuff that comes in the Bazaar scrap packs, which I love. Any regular viewers will know how much I love Bazaar. I will put a link to Bazaar and in the description box, and if you have a look, there's like a little code message in there. If you put that in, you'll get a little freebie if you order anything from Bazaar, so that's always nice. Now, as well as the gorgeous fabrics in the scrap packs, you also get little doodads and stuff, so I chuck them all into this bag so you get like amazing things like this. Sometimes I absolutely hoard these. I even got one that was a letter A. It was complete fluke, I'm sure. And bits of braid and things like that. And occasionally you get these little birdies, and I love them. I love these little birds. You usually see them like hanging up as part of mobiles and things, don't you? So I'm inspired by those, and the fact that spring is in the air, I came up with these little bird brooches, which I thought were really cute. So they've just got a little brooch back on, and you could pin them on a lapel or something, or just on a craft bag. So I could actually just pin one on there, couldn't I? They look quite cute. They're using really tiny scraps of fabric and really quite basic stitches. So if you look at that one, I've got a blanket stitch around the outside. I've got some just little straight stitches there, little seed stitches there, some little individual chains. There's chain stitch around there, and a lot of straight stitching. Most of it is just straight stitching. In all of those stitches I've shown really clear. I actually put it in a frame so that I could show the stitching properly on the camera. I did demonstrate all of those stitches, and also how to do a French knot to make the eye. I ended up using beads for my eyes because I didn't have any black embroidery thread handy, but actually I now quite like the beads, so I'm probably going to stick with them. So yeah, I just thought that was a really cute idea, and you wouldn't even necessarily have to make them into brooches. They could just be stitched onto little projects and things, couldn't they? But let's have a look at what I used. Put them to one side for a minute. So these are the little tiny scraps that I've got. I also, with some of the flimsier fabrics like this one, I wanted to use this because I love the colour, but it's quite flimsy, you can see, and it's got a bit of stretch to it as well. So with that, I dug through my Bazaar scrap packs. So if anyone hasn't seen these are all from they're reclaimed fabrics from clothes, which would otherwise end up in landfill or whatever. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge what you get, but it's an absolutely gorgeous hodgepodge. So I dug out this piece, which is quite plain. You can see that that's come from, it's the edge of a blouse or something, isn't it? But this is quite a nice firmly woven fabric, which I can use as a backing, so I can actually, if I want to use a piece like this, I can just layer them up to give it a bit more stability. So I'll keep that out, and I just went through and picked out where I've been using these pieces I picked out just some of the smaller scraps that I wouldn't know what to do with otherwise. There's my little beads. These are little glass beads. I think that was from a broken necklace at one point. You can see they're all sorts of irregular shapes and sizes, so I just rummaged through them. Pick one. Obviously you need some kind of a brooch back. I've got this little pot of brooch backs. These things are cheap as chips to buy. You can find them in haberdashery shops, craft shops, things like that, or you can get them online. But you know, if you just want to make one of these and you don't want to go out and buy a little pack of these, you could get away with a safety pin. So yeah. You also need something to stuff it with, so I'm going to use this toy stuffing because I have got a lot of this to use. You could also, I keep all my odds and ends of threads and really, really tiny scraps of fabric like that in this. I call it my orts jar because I think this is the official word for these little tiny snippets of thread, orts, O-R-T-S. So I keep my little orts jar and I can use that for stuffing. You could also, in a pinch, you could use a cotton wool ball or something, just pull it apart to fluff it up a bit. Obviously you need thread. I'm using stranded cotton. You could use other things as well, but the stranded cotton, I have got a lot of this, so that's what I'm going with. Mostly I'm using 2 strands at a time. Again, that's something I talked about in the previous video. Another thing I talked about in the previous video because one of my lovely viewers asked the question is, did I have any tips on storing embroidery thread and how not to get it in a tangle and stuff? Well, in reality, this is how I roll. But I did go over some ideas for better ways to manage your thread so you don't end up in this kind of a pickle. But for me, I don't really, it don't bother me. So yeah, if you're interested in some ideas for how not to get into this kind of a state, watch the first video. Oh, obviously needles. I've got one needle that I'm going to use for most of my stitching. It's a fairly long one because when I'm doing a lot of straight stitching, I like to be able to go in and out and do a few stitches at a time. You could use a smaller one. It needs to have a sharp point and a reasonably big eye to comfortably take those 2 strands of embroidery thread. I've also got a needle threader. I managed to break my little needle threader that would go through there, so I'm going to have to wing it with that. But I've got this one that's really good when you come to using a thicker thread or a tapestry needle, because you can just put, so for the little legs I use 6 strands, so they obviously aren't going to go through this smaller needle, and this little needle threader is really handy if you've got eyesight like mine. And I usually keep the finer needle threader as well, but I managed to break it yesterday. I used a little scrap of, it was old scrapbook paper or something, and just drew out my basic bird shape. You can see how I sort of scribbled it round and just cut it out. And then that's the, let's do it that way, that's the little chest piece and the wing. Obviously you can use them either way round. So you might need a pencil to draw that out, you need a pair of scissors. When it comes to transferring that shape onto the fabric, what I ended up doing was just kind of holding it there and cutting around it. If I wanted to use a bit of fabric that wasn't quite big enough, say let's find an example. That doesn't really, or it does. If that was just a little bit smaller and wouldn't quite fit, and I really wanted to use this piece, I would just slightly change it. It's not going to matter, birds all different shapes and sizes. This is really just a guide. You can always cut it freehand if you're brave enough, to be honest. But if you do want to actually carefully draw around a shape, you need to experiment. I've got this, I'll go into these in more detail in the first video as well, like a heat erasable pen like this one. If you're on a darker fabric and that's not going to show, I just grabbed this white pastel pencil because I had it handy. You could try a normal white colour pencil. You could use a biro. You know, to be honest, if I just used a pencil, I could make that show enough to cut my shape. I don't know if your camera will pick it up, but in real life, yeah. So just experiment with whatever you've got. You'll have something. I wouldn't buy anything specially. Right, so I've had a little rummage and decided what I'm going to use next. I'm going to try this piece. I'm going to use this little scrap for the chest, and I'm just going to take a little bit of this interlining. I mean, I could go for, I've got a ready cut wing. No, I'm going to use that. Okay, so first things first, and I'll need something else to use as the backing as well. I'll probably use this plain piece here. So first thing is I'm going to cut this little bird out. Now, if I was going to use felt or something, and possibly if you are a beginner, you might find it easier to use felt. It'll be easier to manage. I would just cut it this size. But because I'm going to use a woven fabric, I'm going to just allow a little bit of a seam allowance, not much, less than 1/2 centimetre. So this is where, if you wanted to, you could draw around, or with a felt pen or whatever you can find that will show on your fabric. These heat erasable ones are nice because as soon as you apply heat, it just disappears. This chalky pastel will rub off if I want to, but I'm going to be stitching over that anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you're confident enough, you can do you can do what I do, just hold it on there and cut round, because if it doesn't come out exactly, it's not going to matter. So I'm just cutting roughly around. I'll tidy up the shape in a moment if I need to. I'm not trying to make them all identical, so it honestly doesn't matter. There we go. So I've just roughly cut that shape. And now I'll look at it and think, do I want to tidy any of that up? Maybe a little bit there. But I think that's okay. Okay, and that's the right side of my fabric. So then I want the little chest piece. Let's just cut that out. And again, I'll just hold it like that. This you don't need a seam allowance because we're going to applique it down onto the main body. For beginners, applique just means apply. It's a way of attaching shape to a base fabric. The wing, I've already happened to have cut a wing. I must have changed my mind about that when I was experimenting yesterday. So that's my main bird there. Those can go out the way. And now I'm just going to just deciding whether I want to make, I'm going to take a thread that kind of matches that chest fabric first. But you can contrast or coordinate whatever you want to do as your bird. So I'm just going to do a little running stitch to hold the chest fabric onto the main body. I'm not going to bother showing you that now because I've covered all that in the first video. And really this video is more giving you the idea. If you want more of a how-to, it will be in that first video really. I think experienced stitchers will just need to see the idea and then they'll run away with it and make it their own. That's what I'm hoping. So I don't bother to pin or anything. I'm just going to hold them together and just go straight in there. I'll see you when I've done. Okay, so that's my chest piece just tacked on with a few straight stitches like that. So now I'm going to blanket stitch around the edge of that just to tidy up the edges, stop it fraying away too much. I have shown blanket stitch in that first video, but I haven't shown how to use it to applique a piece onto another piece, so I'll just do a little bit of that to start off. So this is how I start. I've come out there just a little way in from the edge. Now I'm going in, I'm holding the thread away like that and letting it loop back. I'm going in there and bringing my needle out over the top of that little loop that I've made, just like I showed you in the first video, but it's just using it to tidy up the edge and apply this second piece of fabric onto the first piece. So now again the thread is going away from me and I'm letting it loop back. I'm going in there a little way further along, not too far. I want these quite close together, coming up just at the edge of the piece I'm applying, over that loop and pulling through to focus. Come on, there we go, like that. So I'm going to go all the way around like that. There we go. So I've gone all the way round and I'm just going to go in, whoops, go through to the back and fasten off at the back. So now I want to stitch the wing on, and I think what I'm going to do this time, rather than stitch all around it first, I think actually rather than fasten this thread off, I'm going to do it this way. I'm holding the wing in the position I want it, and I'm just going to do a few single chain stitches. So I've pulled that, don't put it too tight because you'll pucker up the fabric. I've just taken that thread across the back instead of having to fasten off. And now I'm just going to make single chain links. So it's a bit like when I showed the lazy daisy in the first video, except I'm not going to be going around in a circle to make a daisy. I'm going to be doing them separately. And I think these will look a bit like feathers on the wings. And you can experiment with the stitches. So instead of normally, you would just go right back down there really close there, just to anchor that link. But you could experiment and do a really long stitch there like this to get a different shape. So I might do a few of those. I've let that wing move as I've stitched it. It's because I'm trying to hold it out at arm's length. That's why I thought I'd demonstrate the stitches separately in that video yesterday up on a frame, because I knew it's difficult when you're actually working on a piece like this. Now I might just do a few just straight stitches as well. There we go. I think that's quite a fun little wing, because I've now managed to the wing will disappear now. There, I've got that at a slightly wrong angle, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so I'm just going to fasten off at the back. So now I'm going to change colour and use some of this lilac that sort of matches the wing and go around the outline of the wing. This time I think I'm going to go around the outline with a whipped chain stitch, and I think yeah, I covered that in the first video as well. So that's my chain stitch. Now to neaten that up and sort of make the line more raised and bold, I'm gonna whip the chain stitch. In other words, I'm going to wrap this thread around the stitches I've already made. Again, all demonstrated in the first video. I'm hoping I've got enough thread left on this needle to do it without rethreading. Lazy. Little tip when you're whipping the stitch, don't go in with the sharp end. Go under your stitch with the blunt end of the needle, the eye end of the needle, because it's less likely to catch and want to go into the fabric. There we go, so I've done like a whipped chain stitch all around that wing, and now I'm just trimming away any excess bits, being really careful not to snip through my stitching. So that's my wing and my chest on. Right, now what I'm going to do is put the back on the bird. So I just need a little piece. Have I got a piece big enough? No right or wrong side to that backing fabric, so I'm not going to worry about it. And now I need to decide if I want to kind of match this fabric or use a contrast. I haven't got anything to match the blue anyway, but I think it might be quite nice to have a bit of this rusty colour to pick that up, so I'm going to use some of that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to cut the shape of the backing fabric. I'm just going to hold the two layers together and stitch almost all the way around. I'm just going to leave an opening somewhere to stuff it with, and I think it's probably easiest to put the opening along the top where it's fairly straight. I mean, I've got my wing at the wrong angle there, so that's a bit in the way this time, but you know, I'll get around it. Okay, so I'll be back when I've done that. It's just a running stitch, quite small stitches. Okay, so I've just run all the way around with a running stitch. And now I'm going to trim the backing piece. I'm leaving this thread here all threaded up, just to save me having to do it again in a minute. So I'm just trimming this all round. Oops, got a bit close there, doesn't matter. So because these are fantasy birds, nobody can tell you if they're right or wrong. And I've got a tiny opening there, and that's where I'm going to do my stuffing. So I'm just taking little tiny pieces of the stuffing and carefully putting it in. I can get my little finger in there easily enough, but you could use a chopstick or a pencil or something just to make sure it goes into the kind of corners of the shape. So now it's all stuffed. I can pick up my needle and thread again. Hold the edges closed like that and carry on stitching round. So now to tidy that all up, make it look neater, stop the edges fraying, I'm going to blanket stitch all the way around the edge. So again, I did demonstrate the blanket stitch in the first video. Okay, so that's how neatened up the edge a little bit. If you wanted it neater, you could do them closer together, you could make them a little bit smaller, you could do them in a matching thread instead of a contrasting. It just depends on what look you want, really. So now I'm going to put an eye in. So I'm going to put my needle in a little way away and come up where I want the eye to be, and just pull through until that thread sort of disappears. So I know there's a good length of it there, and I'm just going to do a little double stitch to to start me off. And this is, you know, you could make a French knot here, and I did show that in the first video, but I'm going to use the bead again because I just quite like the look of it, and I've got these beads to use. So yesterday I ended up twice with these beads going all over the floor. Okay, so I've just threaded that bead on and pulled it right down to where I want it to be, and now I'm going to stitch right through to the back to pull that in a little bit. And I'm going to come up again and just go through the bead one more time to make sure it's really secure. It does not work trying to do these things at arm's length for a video, you know. It's really tricky. There we go, that'll do. And then so with some of them I did like a lazy daisy around the eye, like with that one, or that one, and then with this one I just did a tiny little back stitch kind of circle, so I might do that this time. And then really I can go nuts with the decorative stitching. Okay, so I've just framed the eye a little bit there. And now I'm going to do some speckles on the chest with what I've got left over. So I'm just going to take this. I'm not worrying about what it looks like on the back here. If you were worried about what it looks like on the back, you'd have to do all your embroidery, I think, before you put the two layers together. And I prefer having this chunkiness to hold on to. So I'm just going to go in through there, come out where the chest is. And I'm just going to do a few speckles. Just little tiny straight stitches. And I think you could probably do this a lot more a lot more carefully than I have here. Just, you know, I'm trying to do it as quickly as I can just to show, but so two important elements missing, feet and beak. So let's sort that out now. So I think with this one I use a little bit of this orange. You could use make whatever colour beak you want. Okay, so I just got this little tiny snippet of fabric. I'm folding it down like that to make a sort of a triangle, and then I'm folding it back again and round again. So I've made a kind of little wedge shape. They come out different every time, but they're quite beaky. And then I'm just going to, I could probably neaten that up a bit, and I'm just going to stitch it onto the back. So it will show like that. Now with one of them, so I did it like that way. Oh yeah, with this one, I enclosed the beak within the two layers of fabric, but I thought it was a bit more fiddly to do, and I was trying to keep it a bit more straightforward if I could. I'll stitch that on in a minute, and then I'll just show you how I'm going to do the legs, and then I'll come back and show you the finished thing. So the legs, oh look, I have got a bit of blue there. I could have done matching. It might have been nicer actually. Well, yeah, let's use the blue for the legs then. So for the legs, I've got this tapestry needle. It's got a much fatter eye and a blunt point, because I'm using all 6 strands of the stranded cotton. You could use any kind of cord or anything you've got that you think would look nice for the legs. So what I'm going to do now is just wiggle the blunt end of this needle between the layers of fabric there. So I'm just wiggling in between to get inside that body, and then I'm bringing it out again a little further along. So like that. Then I'm tying a couple of knots in the end, trim it off a little bit, and actually if you sort of pinch it like that, it makes it hold that little foot shape, which is quite cute. And then I've got to decide how long I want the little legs to be. I think that looks about right for me. And now I'm going to tie a knot in the other end. Just make sure I pull that up to the right. You can still adjust them. I can just pinching it to make it fold like that. And if it won't quite sit still, you can, if it won't hang straight, if you know what I mean, you can just give them a tiny spritz of water, or even use a little bit of PVA if you want to make them sort of stay stiff in a certain position. Got his little leggies, he just needs his beak, and then I'm going to do a little bit more embroidery over the top. I feel like I want something a bit lighter around the eye area. It's a shame I got that wing at a bit of a funny angle, but it's okay. I might do a little bit more here as well, but it's more or less done. I just need to add the brooch pin on the back, or as I say, you could just as well get away with a safety pin. I would say open it up and put a few stitches around the part of it that doesn't know the non-pointy end. Put a few stitches around there, and I think that will work perfectly well. But I've got the brooch back, so I might as well use them. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more of that stitching, and I'll come back and show you how it looks. Okay, so I have done a little bit more work into my little birdie. I tried whipping around the edge of the blanket stitch. I quite like the effect that gave as well. So that's it. So that's them. I've done them quite quickly. I think you could do them more carefully and do a better job probably. I'm sure some of my viewers out there could take this idea and do wonderful things with it. do it a lot better than me. But I still think they're quite cute, and I'm hoping that they are easy enough, bit of a challenge for beginners, but easy enough, you know, and quite small, quite, you know, won't take you too long to do. If you are a beginner, it is, I suppose they are a little bit fiddly. You could make it easier on yourself by, like I suggested before, using felt rather than just scraps of woven fabric. That will make it easier to manage. You could also make them just bigger. You know, that would make them less fiddly to do. I think you could do all of the embroidery like I have with that one before you put them together. But personally, I don't worry about what the back looks like. Look at that mess. It doesn't matter. No one's going to see it. And I think once you've got it stuffed and you've got something to hold on to, it's easier to stitch in and out of and just enjoy yourself. Doodle with your needle. But yeah, and depending on what scraps you've got and what threads you've got, if you want to add sequins or beads, it would be a lovely idea to add, instead of just knotting the little legs like that, you could actually, if you've got some coloured beads or whatever, you could dangle them, couldn't you? You could even do a whole string of little beads, small beads and a bigger bead on the end, something like that. All sorts of things I think you could do with these. So this is just like showing you the idea quickly, just as another way of using up all our little scraps and things and making them into something pretty. I've run out of time now really, but I'm thinking a heart shape would be really fun to do. And that's another thing, that if you're a beginner and you find all this a little bit fiddly, just doing a simple heart shape and just doing lines and lines of running stitch around it following the shape of the heart would also be really pretty. So that's it from me today. Let me know what you think of this idea. Give it a go. I bet you'll do a better job of it than I actually have. It's one of those situations where I've had the idea, I haven't really got time to do it justice at the moment, but I just thought it's nice to throw the idea out there and see what other people might do with it. Okay, that's it from me for now. I will see you again really soon. I've got so much in the pipeline. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.